Howdy, folks. Today it's all about shooting wildlife in the wild, right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. We've spent literally hundreds of hours interviewing some of the most renowned photographers of our time, giving you access to knowledge and expertise that's not available anywhere else. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and if you enjoy this content, consider lending your support on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us create more exciting episodes for you. Your support really does make a difference. But without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, a familiar face on the show, the travel, wildlife, and Northern Lights expert, Dave Williams. Dave, man, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I am good. Yeah, I'm good. After we've solved our little slight technical problems.
It's not a podcast without a few technical itches. I don't think I've ever been on one where I've just connected and gone. So, yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, this is nothing. The last live thing that I did was a complete disaster, technically speaking. It was actually cool, but it was hard going. It had something to do with servers and internet connectivity that was beyond anybody's control, really. But wowzers, man, that was hard work.
Yeah, I bet. Well, here we are. Across. How far away are we? If you were to drive here, 6,000 odd kilometers, I believe. So we're doing pretty well considering the distance.
Yeah, I mean, all things considered, this is pretty amazing. And of course, we'll be in the same room in, just a few days' time.
Yeah. What day is it? 5 days.
Yeah. So, if you are an avid listener of the Camera Shake podcast, keep your eyes peeled because next week, I'm not sure. Actually, I'm going to say this now. Most likely there won't be a full episode next week, which is quite odd because there's usually always an episode. But next week, I don't think that's going to happen. But what we are going to be doing is we're going to do a live broadcast from the Lofoten Islands next week. So that is going to happen. So you can always, if you are listening on the audio version of this podcast, then you can head over to YouTube and check out the live broadcast there. That's going to happen at some point next week. I'm going to announce it on social media and when exactly it's going to happen. But there will be something happening next week, that's for sure. But I'll be filming bits and bobs, and we'll be preparing another episode for the week after. So, it's a working holiday is what I call it.
How exciting. It's going to be cool.
Yeah. It'll be amazing. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But I thought what we're going to focus on today is actually wildlife photography, because you, as some of our listeners will know, you are now a permanent resident in the Lofoten Islands, and that brings with it the opportunity to shoot in terms of photograph, a whole lot of really interesting wildlife out in the in the Arctic. So tell us a little bit about your sort of recent adventures and discoveries.
Adventures and discoveries? That sounds cool. The Northern Lights thing is obviously a big deal here. So there's Northern Lights every night, and that's the priority for me. It's my passion. But during the day, obviously, there's so many amazing landscapes out there, and there's a lot of wildlife. But the wildlife around here is kind of unique because there aren't really many big things. There's loads of little things. There's one big thing that stands out, which is the king of the forest, the Norwegian moose. And at the moment they've just shed the velvet on their antlers, and they're all starting to get a bit frisky, chasing the girls around. So it's an interesting time at the moment, seeing what they're up to out there. But yeah, it's the moose is the main subject.
What is the difference between an elk and a moose?
An elk? Okay, so the confusion comes because the Norwegian and Swedish word for moose is elg, E-L-G. And so that isn't too far from elk. But an elk is a North American deer. So it's like slightly bigger version of a red stag, or red deer, but with grey hair, a bit of a thicker fur on the neck, and yeah, so it's a different animal. They're all within, like moose and deer are all in the deer family, so are reindeer, obviously. The moose is the biggest deer, but an elk is not an elg. An elg is a moose.
And it's just one thing I've noticed, obviously, having been learning Swedish for the last 107 days or something, 108 days. As you say, the Swedish word for moose is älg, which sounds very similar to elk, hence the confusion. But I think elk and moose are easily distinguishable by the different antlers. They're completely different. Yeah.
And
there are no elks in the Lofoten Islands.
I don't know if there's even any in Scandinavia. The elk is a North American animal.
Do you?
So I don't think there's any here.
I know you've been hunting moose. I've been hunting again with a camera, not with a gun, over the last few weeks. And I found it very interesting, just following you on social media, and seeing your little adventures. How difficult is it to photograph a moose in the wild? Are they commonplace?
Depends.
Do you need to track them down?
It depends. And that's the worst answer for anything in photography is it depends. But the answer is it depends. There are groups of them that tend to stick to certain areas. So we know where some of the moose are, roughly. They tend not to move very far, but they can suddenly decide to just relocate, move house, go to a different area. At the moment, it hasn't really happened a lot. So we know where they are now. We know where they've been for the summer in their specific groups in specific areas. And they're now sort of tracking towards their winter areas. So the mountains become out of bounds. The mountains will become covered in snow. So there's no food up there. So they'll be in valleys, places where they can stay a little bit warm and still access food. But the food changes from berries and flowers and all this delicious stuff. It changes to just tree bark and seaweed because of the snow and the cold. So yeah, when we figure out where they are, it's all to do with like where have they been recently, which area does each individual or each family cover, and then we've got a good chance of finding them because we know we watch them every day. We know where they sort of habitually go.
I mean, obviously, the Lofoten Islands being a sort of a string of islands, I'm guessing they're not moving between the islands. They're just going to be
they are.
In one area. Are they?
They are. Yeah. Moose are very, very good swimmers.
That's
How did they get here? How did they get here in the first place? They swam here.
I find it quite fascinating. I don't think I've ever seen a moose swim.
I've got a picture of a moose swimming. They're really good swimmers. They can dive up to about 7 meters to get seaweed from the bottom. In some places in Canada, a moose is a delicacy for a killer whale.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, they're really, really, really strong swimmers.
So how do you approach a shoot? Like when you go out to shoot moose, how do you approach that? What sort of equipment would you take with you ordinarily?
The bigger, the better, usually. But sometimes they can be so close that you want to like a 24-70 or an 85 prime or something. Generally, they're going to be quite far away. And although we have a good relationship with some of the moose around here, in that they recognize our smell and our voice, the few of us that do this regularly, they're not always going to be receptive. They're not always going to be happy. So, yeah, the general rule is you don't go within 10 meters. If the moose looks at you in the right way and the body language is good, then, if they come to you, that's fine. And we've been within meters, like 2 meters of a moose. But if their body language changes, if their ears go back, if their feet come up, if they start making noises and staring at you, that's not a good sign, and that means get out of there. So yeah, we need to be very respectful of their wishes and understand that even though they know us, some of them, they are wild, and getting the right lens to get the job done is crucial. So I think my main one is probably the 200-400 f4. I've got a 120 to 300 f2.8. I've got a 60 to 600 for the D500. So it's a DX lens, not a full frame. But yeah, then there's the 24-70, because you can just suddenly turn a corner and there's a moose like right there in your face. So,
yeah. That's probably the longest lens I've got. It's a 70 to 200, I guess.
Yeah.
So
the 60 to 600 crop works out at just shy of 900. And then there's a 1.4 teleconverter as well. So we can become nearly 1200 mil, I guess, if I needed to.
So do you lay in wait? Like, or do you literally track them down?
Yeah, no, I look for them. Some animals, you need to wait for them. Foxes, otters, ferrets, things like that. But with the moose, you can go look for a moose. They're so big that they're not going to, it's rare that they're going to suddenly appear. You need to go and find them, and then let them get used to you for a few minutes, understand your presence, understand that you're not there to hurt them, you're no threat, so they relax and carry on doing whatever they were doing, probably eating. And then, yeah, get in there and get some pictures.
Well, by their very nature, they're not necessarily dangerous animals, they're just huge.
Yeah, they're dangerous in that if you annoy them, they will attack you and they will win. They can be 2 meters tall and they can weigh 750 kilos for a big male. Female about 600 kilos. So if they want to come at you, they're going to use their front feet to go down like that at you with that weight behind it. You're not going to stand a chance.
I think we've spoken about this. I had a strange encounter of the moose kind in Canada a few years ago, and that was very, very impressive. It really makes you appreciate the sheer size and weight of these animals. Because I'll tell the story really quickly. My wife and I were on our honeymoon, and we walked down a trail that was actually closed, and we were really supposed to be there, but it looked really interesting, so we thought, we'll give it a shot. And then really out of nowhere, we could hear loads of noise coming from the thicket. Branches breaking, footsteps, that sort of thing. And it very quickly became clear that something was moving through the forest that was rather large. And then the next thing we knew was this moose basically stepped out onto the trail and stopped. And his head turned and he looked at us. And at that moment, we both just froze, completely froze. And I remember what was going through my mind. I thought, I forgot my bear spray. Dang. And the only thing I had... yeah, why would it? But I thought, well, okay, I'm unarmed. I don't have any bear spray. I have a camera in my hand. And for some reason, I thought, if this thing comes at me, I'm just going to flash it. As if that would make any difference. But luckily, it just looked at us for, a good few seconds. And then it just turned its head and walked straight across the path, straight across the trail, back into the forest, and it was gone. Yeah. And it was just the most amazing experience. Because the thing was, it was really, it was the size of a VW camper van. It was huge.
Mm-hmm. The difference between Canadian or North American moose and European moose is that the European, excuse me, the European moose tend not really to have many predators, and so they're far more relaxed. Whereas the North American moose, because they have predators, they're a bit on edge all the time. Is that a bear or a wolf? Is it going to hurt me? Whatever. And so because of that, they're a bit more defensive, and they get a reputation that they're a scary animal because they're defensive. So that's like the big difference between those two. Anatomically, there's nothing really much in it. They're not identical, but they're almost the same. But yeah, I mean, if you're in Norway or Sweden, a moose is not a threat as long as you're respectful, watch its body language, don't annoy it. Yeah, don't get too close.
Talking about predators, you know what I read recently, which really made me laugh. Cats in North America have a lot more natural predators than they have in Europe, right? Because obviously, we in Europe, for those American, exactly, yeah. So for those American listeners, in Europe, it's commonplace to let cats roam around outside. I mean, you hardly ever hear of a cat that's like an indoors cat. Occasionally, maybe if somebody lives in a tower block or apartment, like an apartment block or something like that. But generally speaking, cats are out and about all the time. My own cat included, because I don't really have any natural predators here. In North America, it's somewhat different. But did you know? Do you know what the most common cause of death is for a cat in terms of predators in North America? Like which animal do you think is the most prolific?
Probably it's either people or coyotes.
Well, people often think it's coyotes, but it's not. Surprisingly, it's an owl. So the equivalent of the biggest type of owl in North America, which is actually related to the European owl, but it's about twice the size. And so a lot of the time when cats go missing, they literally just disappear, as opposed to when they're run over by a car, you'll find them occasionally. But they just disappear. That's basically because they're being grabbed or picked up by owls, and that's the end of it. You never see them again. Little known fact.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
There's owls here. As you brought it up. There's a northern hawk owl that is starting to appear now. They spend the winter here, so they're starting to appear now, looking for their trees that they're going to live in. So they'll fly around, find a tree, see how much food there is. If there's enough food, they'll stay there. If there's not, they'll find a different area, a different tree. At the moment, they're selecting their trees for the winter, which is cool. It's a black and white owl, quite small, northern hawk owl. But then we also have the long-eared owl and the short-eared owl, which is the hawk owl and something else owl. So yeah, there's owls here as well. There's a lot of wildlife here, as you said at the beginning.
Talking about birds, one thing I heard recently, did you know that before crowbars were invented, crows used to ordinarily drink at home?
Brilliant.
Anyway, back to the serious business of wildlife photography. Okay, so actually, it's just purely personal interest. So I recently had some of my family members went to Austria for a holiday in the Alps, and they came across a whole lot of marmots, which I find really fascinating animals. And I think I've read somewhere that you find marmots in Norway as well. Have you ever seen any?
Not here. I think they're further south. There are otters, ferrets, weasels, but no marmots. Not here. I think the nearest ones might be in sort of Kiruna, Abisko area in Sweden, which is not far away. And the other thing that lives there that's kind of similar, I guess, is the wolverine.
Okay.
So I wonder if the wolverine maybe eats the marmot. Don't know. But no, I don't think there are any here. There certainly haven't been any pictures or anything discussed that I've seen about them.
So what
They're a
would
cool animal, though.
They're very cool animals, yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly related to the ordinary squirrel, apparently.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's just they're all the most interesting animal. I don't know if it falls into that family or whether it's a marsupial, but the coolest thing that looks like that is a quokka. Have you seen a quokka?
I haven't, though. I don't even know what it is.
Okay, so a quokka is like a tiny. It's like an oversized guinea pig. That is that. Yeah, that's a good description. It's like an oversized guinea pig. It lives on in Western Australia, specifically on an island off the coast near Perth, and it has no natural predators, and so you can get really close to them, and they're completely chill around you, and they smile. Google the quokka. We'll change subject, but when you have a minute, Google the quokka. Quokka.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. So what other animals do you typically find? Because, again, for those of you who are, for the uninitiated, the Lofoten Islands are approximately, and here's where I get myself confused, 200 kilometers or 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle?
Kilometers.
Okay. So we're talking about, give or take, 100 miles plus minus north of the Arctic Circle.
106. So hang on a minute. 200 kilometers is 125 miles.
Right. So what other wildlife do you typically find in that sort of area?
Well, down the road, there's reindeer. There's no reindeer here in the Lofoten Islands, but literally as soon as you cross the bridge that takes you off the archipelago, there's reindeer. There's roe deer here, which have moved in last year. They've been seen again. So hopefully they'll be moving in. And interestingly, about how far? About an hour and a half to 2 hours east of here, last week, there was a reported bear sighting, brown bear. So that's cool. If they come here, that would be amazing. A little bit further away than that, there are wolves. So if they come here, that would be amazing. And then in the sea, there are humpback whales, fin whales, sperm whales, killer whales or orca, lots of shark and fish species, the cod, obviously, the Arctic grey. It's a very, very rich area for wildlife because the Gulf Stream flows in. So the warm water from the Gulf of Mexico crosses the North Atlantic and it lands here, which is why it's quite temperate in the winter. So it will get to, at the worst, it will get to minus 25, but not for long if there's really bad weather. But it will average between 0 and minus 15. And that's degrees centigrade or Celsius. Don't know what it is in Fahrenheit for the minuses. 32 is minus, so it'll be between 32 Fahrenheit and roughly about 0 Fahrenheit, I think, for minus 15. That warm water enriches the sea, so there's fantastic sea life. It gives us a good climate here. But then obviously that has a knock-on effect on the weather, which affects the land. So the mountains and the land around here are really rich as well, loads of nutrients. which gives us a fantastic wildlife, and like the soil's really good for growing food. And everything around here is awesome. Whereas if you just go 2 hours inland, it will suddenly become -30, -35. Nothing grows. All the trees are frozen, which is fantastic for photography. It's really difficult to live there though. So the Lofoten Islands, and then all the way up, like Senja, all the way up the coast of the fjords of northern Norway. Fantastic climate, and fantastic fauna and flora as well.
You find it in Central Europe as well, actually. The further you move away from the coast, the more continental the climate becomes and the more extreme the temperatures become. Like, for example, in the south of Germany, where I grew up, that's a good 800 kilometers from the nearest coast, again, sort of give or take. And the weather there the climate there's completely different from the climate in the UK, for example, where it's more of an island based climate. It's extreme cold in the winter, much hotter in the summer, and these sort of in-between seasons, spring and fall or autumn, are not as pronounced. They're really quite short in comparison. In the UK, autumn seems to drag on absolutely flipping forever, before. And then you have a winter, which is very moderate, and then spring goes on, and it never seems to end, because normally, the last couple of years being an exception maybe, but summer really never really comes, and then we're back in autumn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've missed it because the weather here has been. We've had. I don't know how to describe it. So the Sahara, the fan wind that comes from the Sahara and heads north. That's happened, and that is why you had sand on your car last week.
Yeah,
and why it's been so hot there. But here, all we've had is the result of that has just been clouds. But it means that you've had a delayed summer. It's mid-September, and you had summer last week for a couple of days.
30 something degrees. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah.
Whereas here, I think the hottest I had it here was about 17 or 18, but it's just been cloudy because we've had a northerly wind that Sahara wind has been clashing with, and it just condensed and made cloud everywhere, which has been annoying because the northern lights were pretty good. But now the skies are opening up, so that's cool.
I've been filming Platypod's latest video throughout the heat wave, and you can really see it. I mean, it was sweltering, and it was incredible. Oh man!
Yeah, and you have to close all the windows to keep the noise out, so that keeps the heat in as well. Nice.
Yeah, it's like I was baking myself. That's not funny.
Awesome.
So, what sort of impact do you think does that have on the wildlife out in the Lofoten Islands with all sort of weather variations?
Having the warmer weather allows more species to be happy, and it gives them more food. So otters, for example, because the seas here don't freeze because of the Gulf Stream, the otters survive. If the seas were to freeze, they would either have to move and find a new home, or they would just not survive here. It has a massive impact, on everything, including people. People are happier here because it's cold. Winter's properly winter, but it's not -35 every day like it is in, Finnish Lapland, or if you're I don't know, Pallastunturin, Akaslompolo, or somewhere like that in Finland, or Levi, or somewhere in the middle of Lapland, in the middle of the massive land. Then your daily life is a struggle. You can't turn your car on without spending half an hour warming it up first. And, if you start work at 7 a.m., that's a difficult thing to do every day for the winter. So, yeah, it has a big impact, not only on the wildlife, but on everything around here. It's a winter wonderland, but less inconvenient.
The thing that comes to my mind, we were talking about, technical or technology problems, like getting a car started, for example, in those kind of climates. And I know this from Canada, of course, where it's the same, people have the same issues. What impact does that have on your camera equipment, though? Like being in extreme weather like that, extreme cold, What sort of impact does it have?
Yeah, it's hard. So anything that uses a lithium-ion battery is going to have a problem, because these things don't like the cold. They can't hold their charge in the cold, and they can't recharge in the cold. So these things are an issue. You need to keep them warm. And whatever tactic you use to keep them warm, as long as you keep them warm, that sort of solves the issue. So you can put them in your pocket close to your body, or you can, put hand warmers on them. There's so many tricks and techniques to do it. The main thing is just keeping them away from the cold. The next thing is things like tripods. So here's the platypod handle. It's made of aluminium or aluminum. If you touch that at -30 with your bare hands, your hand is not coming off. So gloves. So gloves are an issue. I found a perfect, I don't have one here to show. They're in my other room. A glove for photographers with a flap on your finger that opens up. So your fingertip and your thumb can come out and press buttons, touch screens, but then you fold the flap back over and you've got a really good, really well-insulated glove. They're designed specifically for photographers. They're called Valorette. I'm going to send you a link to put in the comments for the video or in the description. They're amazing. And they solve that issue because you can do all the things that you need your fingers for without taking your glove off. You just get your finger out. So that's cool. But then, so batteries, anything metal, lenses. All lenses, they're so, right. So the front of the lens and the back of the lens. When the back of the lens is inside the camera, if there's any moisture incursion and the back fogs up, you've got an issue. So every time you take your lens off the camera when it's cold, especially when it's cold and humid, you need to completely dry it, wipe it, clean it, or basically just avoid taking the back off or taking it off the camera. With the front end, every time you go outside in moist, cold air, you'll get a little frost on there. And then you'll go inside, like into a warm car, into a warm building, and for your body, that is warming you up. You feel better, but your lens is then defrosting. And then you go back outside, and that's now wet, and then freezes again. And so you get fog and ice and all kinds of problems with the lens. The easiest way to solve that is to think about insulation. I've got a frog in my throat today. I'm sorry. I keep coughing and clearing my throat. So when you go outside with your camera into the cold, if you can, leave it there. If you're planning on continuing to use your camera, once it's cold, keep it cold. That is kind of counterintuitive from the battery perspective, but you can change the battery and take the battery out. If the camera's cold, let the camera be cold. That will protect the lens. Once you get seriously cold, where sort of outside the operating range of your camera, so anything below about -25, that's going to start causing the electronics in your camera to mess up and malfunction. So from that point, then you don't let your camera stay cold. That makes sense? So, like around freezing, around 0°C or 32°F, down to about -15, that's like the safe range to leave the camera in the cold. Like, let's say you're going on vacation to Lapland and you go on a husky safari, right? And you're outside with the dogs for an hour and you're taking pictures. And then they say, do you want to come in the hut and have a hot chocolate? Leave the camera outside, because that sudden temperature change to where the hot chocolate is and where there's probably a fire and warm air, that's going to do more bad than good. And when you go in, your camera will mist up. When you go back out, it will mist up again. And that condensation and frosting and thawing process is what damages the camera. So then when you're done at the end of the day, so if you've been out shooting Northern Lights, or if you're, you've been to see the reindeer, whatever you've done in the cold, you don't want to suddenly make the camera warm by just taking it indoors. So if you get into a car, put it in the back. Your heat vents are in the front. So put the camera in the back, like in the boot, the trunk, whatever, in the back. Secondly, put it in the camera bag in the back, because your camera bag is insulated. Every camera bag is insulated, whether it's like designed insulated or whether it's just a bag with a zip. It's going to trap some of the air inside. And that cold air will gradually warm up rather than having a sudden shock. So that will help to protect it. But yeah, ultimately, being in the cold with a camera, you have to be careful and you have to think about everything that's happening, because they just don't last very long here and they get that shock. Like I killed a camera in Iceland, not on purpose. I didn't murder it, but a camera of mine died because I went near a waterfall and water spray from the waterfall got on the camera. I dried it off and I thought it was fine. But then that night I went out shooting the Northern Lights and there was just a tiny bit of water still inside the camera. Inside. That got on the circuit boards and it froze. And then when I put it back in the car, it thawed. And then when I went out again, it froze again. And it obliterated the camera. Beyond economic repair. I sent it to Nikon. They said, beyond economic repair, here's a new one. Like, all right. Yeah. So the cold is an issue. And the colder it is, the more of an issue it is. But there are lots of ways to deal with the cold.
So what's your number one tip for people to protect their camera gear in the cold?
Those were the three best things. Like, take them all equally. Protect. Can I throw a curveball answer back at you?
Sure.
If you want to take good photos in the cold, is it more important? It's very important that you aren't cold. If you're cold to the point where your nose, your fingers, especially your pinky fingers, the back of your neck, your feet, if they're cold, you're not going to be focused on being creative. You're going to just want to warm up again. So you won't be able to stay outside in the cold to get amazing pictures of the Northern Lights, of the reindeer, of the frozen forests, of waterfalls, whatever. So the most important thing, if you want to be creative with photography in the cold, is to keep yourself warm. Look after yourself. If you are warm, you can enjoy being out in the cold for longer, spending more time looking after your gear and getting better pictures without getting distracted by being cold.
I think that's a perfect segue, because the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is like how to keep yourself safe under those conditions. I mean, we talked about the equipment, but you gotta under those extreme, or in those extreme conditions, you need to keep yourself safe first of all. What's your sort of your best advice on keeping cold, especially over a prolonged period of time?
So everyone says layers, and there's a reason everyone says layers. It's layers are perfect. If you put on a big, thick, Canada Goose jacket, super dry jacket, a big, thick jacket, that is not going to keep you as warm as wearing thin layers. Because just like a wetsuit in the water, if you have layers on, then you're trapping air between each layer of clothing and between that and your body, and allowing your body heat to warm that up. So layers is the best thing. The places where you lose the most heat are your face, your neck, your ears, your hands, your fingers, and your feet. If you wrap those up, wear good socks, good scarf, good hat, a snood or something, those Valorant photography gloves, they're really good. if you look after those parts of your body, you'll stay warmer for longer. But just like, when you see like people run a marathon and they wrap them in a silver blanket, the space blanket afterwards, all that's doing is the same thing. It's trapping a layer of air between your body and the blanket to keep you warm. They rely on the fact that you are warm to start with. That's how they work. If you're wrapped in a space blanket but you're cold, that's not going to warm up. So you need to be warm at the beginning. So making sure, like when you're going out, that you start warm from the car or from the house or from the hotel or whatever, it keeps that warm air trapped in between those layers for longer to help you out. When I say layers, I mean go and buy base layers, proper base layers, and then like thermal trousers, thermal tops. So if it's really cold, I'll have a base layer and a t-shirt and then a jumper and then a jacket. So there's those 4 layers to work with. I've got various gloves, but if I've only got my thin gloves, I'll put on a pair of, what are they called? Like undergloves? What are they called? Glove liners. So I have a pair of thin gloves, like cotton gloves, and then the proper gloves on top. Sometimes I'll be rocking 2 pairs of socks. It depends. But you have to keep yourself warm, and layers is the way to do that. The other
I've been known to double sock.
Don't get wet.
I've been known to double sock in the winter for sure.
I imagine you have.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's, I'm not really that accustomed to the cold. I mean, I grew up in the south of Germany. It does get cold, but
yeah.
But I always think it's a different kind of cold. What strikes me in the UK very often is, it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't go far below zero, but below freezing here.
Yeah.
But it's always wet at the same time. It just makes everything feel.
That's the thing.
More
yeah. If you're in the middle of Lapland where it's dry, you can sustain minus 30, because if there's no wind and there's no humidity, minus 30 just feels the same as zero. But if there's wind, or if there's any humidity, any moisture in the air at all, that's going to make you really cold really quick. And that's why here I can have it colder and not feel as cold as in, like, the UK, for example. You can have like a few degrees above freezing in the UK and it feels so bad because of the wind and the humidity. So yeah, you can relate that, because if you know that it's not going to be windy, or you know that it's not going to be humid, you can stay out in the cold for a lot longer.
What's generally the best time to shoot wildlife out in the in northern Norway or in the Lofoten Islands, in terms of time of year?
So, okay. Each animal is completely different. So if I focus on here, you can relate it to different parts of the world, but I'll focus on what's going on here. So the moose are always here. The orcas out in the sea. So if we're looking at anything we want to take pictures of in the sea, we need to think about what it's going to eat and what the sea temperature is. So if it gets too hot or too cold for the specific animal, they're not going to stay here. The food that they eat is herring. And so if the herring tracks north or tracks south, the orca's going to follow them, and they're not going to be here anymore. When the herring comes back, the orca will be back. So we think about the food that an animal eats. The birds, lots of birds, not all birds, but lots of birds are migratory. So they're going to be here for seasons. So there are birds that will be in Africa, and then they'll fly here for the summer. So they'll winter in Africa, they'll be here in the summer, so that they're keeping a similar temperature, I get, or not. It's not that similar, but not too extreme. But then there are animals that come here for the winter from the north. So there are some animals in Svalbard, some birds in Svalbard that will come south away from the North Pole, and this is just far enough away for them that it's not too cold. So every animal is different. But then if you want to really think about if you know an animal is in a specific location, you want to think more about when they're going to be active. So that is basically eating, when they're eating. That's all they do is eat and sleep. It's a good life. The first thing in the morning when they wake up, they need food and water. And this is pretty much every animal, every bird, everything will wake up and be hungry. So first thing in the morning at first light or around dawn, you're going to find a lot of animals. And then a lot of them will sort of take a nap around midday. And then early afternoon, they'll be starting to move about again. And then evening time, they need to eat before they go to bed. So those times of day, morning and evening, are fantastic for almost every animal because they need food. A lot of it, as you like, even with the killer whales, like I mentioned, a lot of it is about food.
Fantastic. So let's digress a little bit because there's a lot of stuff happening next week, of course, in the Lofoten Islands. That's one of the reasons why I'll be joining you over there. Of course, we're going to be exploring the local wildlife, especially the reindeer, and hopefully we'll see a moose or two.
Yeah.
I think that's the plan. But there's a whole lot of other stuff happening as well. So you give us sort of a helicopter view of what is going on next week.
So the workshop is going to be awesome. This one is Viking themed. So we have a professional Viking, or in fact, this one we have two professional Vikings. They're going to be accompanying us around and being models. So they're not going to be a Viking every day. We're going to have just regular models. And we're going to get, I already know the Vikings, but you and the attendees are going to get to know them. So they'll be more like friends by the end of it. We're going to just take their pictures in various places. We're going to learn about everything we need to know to shoot them. Like how to pose, how to work with lighting, how to use ambient light, and how to compose a person within a landscape, how to compose them against a background. And then we're going to look at the landscapes on their own, how to shoot a landscape, how to look at depth in a scene, color, lighting, times of day. We're going to look at Northern Lights masterclass so that everyone knows exactly what they're looking at and how to forecast what might happen in the sky, but also terrestrial weather, because you need dark, clear skies, cloud-free skies. This workshop's going to be awesome. It's action-packed. The people that are joining us can take as much from the little as they want from it. They can, if they want to learn more about the Northern Lights than landscapes, then they can pay more attention and practice more. If they want to do more Vikings, it's the same. It's going to be awesome. And we're lucky that we've got one of the best hotels around here with an awesome classroom. It's a perfect base camp called Svinoya Råbod. And yeah, I can't wait, dude. This workshop's going to be awesome. And now that it's like a new concept as well, having an extra element. So hopefully it works and paves the way for more amazing workshops like it in the future.
It's definitely super exciting. It's been a long time in the planning, and it's going to happen next week. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, people can follow us on the Camera Shake, Facebook group or on Instagram and so on and so forth. We'll be putting a lot of what's happening on there. Likewise, if you're not following Dave Williams on Instagram or on Facebook, if you're not following him yet, now's the time. Again, if you're interested, all you have to do is head over to idavewilliams.com/training. You can get all the details on what this workshop entails. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be super fun. And I'm sure, we'll be, like I said, we'll be doing a live broadcast or live stream from the Lofoten Islands next week at some point. And of course, we'll be putting more stuff together for follow-up episodes and so on. So yeah.
One of the attendees is also going to be doing a live, I think it's live. If not, he's recording a thing. I think it's live. But there's going to be other cool stuff happening as well that we'll share on our accounts as well for people that are interested.
Absolutely. So, whatever's happening, if you're not a member of the Camera Shake podcast Facebook group, make sure you sign up to that, because that's where I'm going to be posting everything that's happening at the Lofoten Islands, whether that's on the Camera Shake accounts or whether it's elsewhere. I'll be linking to that as well. So, you'd be able to get like a total overview. It'll be amazing. I think, I know that I'm going to learn a lot, because, it's not every day you get an opportunity to photograph Northern Lights, for example. So that's one of the things I'm looking forward to the most, but it'll be absolutely amazing. Dave, it's been a pleasure having you on the show again. As per usual, as always. I'm like, I hesitate calling you a guest, because you're not really a guest. You're part of the show. So,
it's always good to be here.
Fantastic.
Do you know what else? Do you know what else we should maybe mention?
What's that?
Actually, it literally just popped into my head. Platypod. So Platypod sponsors the Camera Shake, but we are now, how far? We're a couple of months deep into overhauling and repurposing the Platypod YouTube channel. And so you and I are both creating educational content for Platypod in the form of short videos, which are hard-hitting photography tips on various subject genres, styles. So if anyone wants to check that out, we'd really appreciate it. We'd love your feedback, whether you think we're going in the right direction with the classes, or if there's anything you want us to teach you in a quick way on YouTube about photography. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Absolutely. Again, just head over to youtube.com/platypod tripods, I believe it is, and you'll see.
I think it's just Platypod. Either way, search for Platypod.
If you search for Platypod, you'll come across it. Like Dave mentioned, we've been making some educational content for the Platypod YouTube channel. Yes, it'd be super interesting actually to get your feedback and to hear. Just let us know. Is there anything that you want us to do? Is there anything you'd be interested in? Is there any questions you have? Any answers you want? We're more than happy to create some more content about that. It's been super fun so far. We're doing a video each every month, so it's an ongoing series, and it'll be there's much more to come. In fact, I'm literally just finishing off this month's video for the channel, so that'll be out towards the end of
Looking forward to seeing it.
End of the month, yeah. So yeah.
And if people want to learn more about moose photography, I have a video on the Platypod channel about just that.
Exactly. That's one of the things that gave me the idea, because I was looking at your moose footage and thinking like, that'd be an interesting thing. I wonder how that works. Okay, folks, that's all for today. It's been fantastic catching up with Dave again. But before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 147 with Dave Williams, where we discuss the Viking workshop in greater detail. I'm sure you'll love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com to help us continue creating and bringing you more exciting episodes. It really does mean the world to us, and it really does make a difference. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, did you know that there's a fully fledged video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest photography in full Technicolor? All you have to do is go over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes on there. And if you are on YouTube already, get in touch and leave a comment, and remember to hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. You can help us reach a greater audience all over the world. Once again, thank you for listening and watching, and I'll see you next Thursday.